Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on NUSH DSA. So the people here are me, Chunwei, and Paul, and we're presenting today. There will also be a recording at the end of the session, so don't worry about taking any notes or anything. Okay, so first, a bit about us. Yes, as mentioned, our names are Chunwei and Paul, and we're registered business of ECFA since May 2023. Our core focus is on Olympiad tutoring, so mainly we do math and physics Olympiad. I personally mostly teach physics Olympiad at the secondary school level or higher, but we are also looking to expand into other sciences, and we offer both individual and group tutoring. And yeah, we also offer typical private tuition services. So if you have any other questions, you can just ask us and we'll try to accommodate where as much as possible.
Settings.
So first, a bit about us and our qualifications. I went to the International Physics Olympiad and I was a trainer for physics. So meaning I was hired by NUSH to train the students for some physics competitions. And I'm hoping to study in Germany at the University of Würzburg. And there's also Paul, who is, as you can see, a talented man who got 5 gold medals at the Singapore Mathematical Olympiad and is going to study mathematics at Cambridge. So a bit more about our goals. We're hoping to make a tuition-centric business structure, meaning that more of what you pay will go to the tutor as opposed to us. We're also hoping for a change in the mindset of the educational system, in the sense that we will hope that the focus of our education will go away from scoring well in tests such as exams or Olympiads and more towards problem-solving skills. Okay, so this is the content of our presentation. First, we'll be doing a brief comparison of NUSH versus IP schools. So this is in case you want to know more about NUSH from our perspective. And oh, by the way, we are both NUSH alumni, and all our tutors will be NUSH alumni. So first, we'll be giving you our comparison of NUSH and other IP schools. Then we'll be talking about preparation and our services. If you have any questions, feel free to send them in chat. We will be looking through them regularly, and if we can answer them without breaking the flow, we will do so, or we will answer it verbally during open Q&A at the end. So first, the NUSH versus IP schools. Okay, so those of you that went to the open house and so on might already know this, but for a brief introduction for those who do not, NUSH, okay, so the NUSH structure is, so going through all 6 years is as such. First, NUSH starts from a foundation year. In year 1, you take triple science and 1 math, and there's no choice in what subjects you take beyond a few certain electives or enrichment that you might want to take to further your knowledge. But generally, the core subjects, meaning the ones that you study, the ones that you take exams for, are fixed, and that is triple science. In year 2, it continues the same way, except that you choose 1 additional humanities subject. And you still do triple science in year 2. Then from year 3 onwards, what you do begins counting in your CAP. So CAP is the grading system that NUSH has, and if you went to NUS, you should be familiar with this. It is the exact same system as used in NUS. So, and it is a continual grading system, meaning the diploma you get at the end, the grades on that diploma will include all your module grades from year 3 all the way until year 6. So at year 3, it begins counting in CAP, but you still take triple science. So, and from year 4 onwards, these are known as specialization years, where you can choose a subject combination. The minimum you have to take is math and 2 sciences. So a lot of people take math, physics, and chemistry only, but you can also take a third science, which is also very common, or you can take a humanities. So, for example, math, physics, chemistry, and music, that is a possible combination. And all of these majors will be counted into your final graduation CAP, meaning the grade you get, the grade that shows up on your diploma. So as compared to other schools, so basically from year 1 to year 4 is kind of like a foundation year as well, except that they don't do triple science, they do combined science. And at year 4, you take O levels, or if you're an IP school, you don't take O levels at all, and you just move on. In year 5 to 6, you take A levels, and yeah, you can take math. You must take math in 3 subjects, and 1 must be contrasting. You can also take up to 1 H3 subject, and the IB is quite similar. So just to emphasize 2 very important differences that will influence your choice a lot. First is the triple science in year 1, in year 2, and year 3. as compared to combined science until year 2 for A-levels and IB diploma. So this is significantly better if you want to focus mostly on science. And even in the later years, so in year 4 to 6, or the JC years year 5 to 6, in NUS High you have the choice not to take any humanities, while in A-level schools you must have one contrasting subject. The second important difference is the grading system. So in an A-level school, all that will matter is your A-level grade. But in NUS High, that is different. So instead of having a single final exam, the grade on your diploma will be a weighted average of all your grades from year 3 all the way until year 6. So meaning that you do not need to stress out about what happens in year 6. In fact, year 6 is actually one of the most chill years in NUS High, but you do need to pay more attention to your performance all the way, even in year 3. So to summarize the pros, NUSH is science focused and can go quite deep in some subjects, and you have access to NUS modules in year 5 or year 6 through the honours program, meaning that you can take some modules in NUS even while you're still in NUS High School. It is also the only school with triple science options and has a supportive research environment. And as I mentioned, the continued grading means that there's significantly less stress at year 6. And it's also more vigor in certain science competition preparations. So some cons are, it's specialized, so you can't do pure arts like A-levels or IBs. And there's also a smaller range of art subjects and programs to choose from. And another issue is that the level of vigor can be challenging for some. So some people find that the core curriculum is too difficult and you can't try out subjects first before specializing. So even though you do get some humanities choices, you won't be able to say that in year 3, I don't really want to do science anymore and I want to do arts. You can't just drop all sciences and start doing mostly arts. You still have to take mostly sciences. There's also a bit of difference in the humanities subjects in that they have more quantitative focus. So for example, in econs, there's a lot more math, whereas in A-levels, your econs will be mostly essays. And for music, for example, there are stricter project requirements, such as having to do a project as compared to H2 higher music. Okay, so moving on to our DSA preparation tips. So this is the procedure that you might be familiar with already. First, there'll be a DSA selection test for all applicants. Then there'll be a DSA selection camp for some applicants that are selected, as well as and then there'll be an interview for some people that need further assessment. And then after that, the offers will be decided. So going through them one by one, first is a DSA test, which everyone has to go through. So there are 2 papers, one math and one science. And the focus is on higher order thinking questions within or not straying too far from the DSA syllabus. So specifically for math, some level of math Olympiad exposure is helpful, but just to emphasize, this does not give them a significant advantage, and this does not mean that the paper will be a math Olympiad paper. So they may be similar in the sense that math Olympiad and the NUS High DSA test for math want to test the same of thinking skills as well as visualization, and Paul will be going through some examples in the camp later as for what kind of skills specifically these are. And so having some level of exposure is helpful, but as I mentioned, you shouldn't be worrying too much if you have no Olympiad exposure at all. In fact, I didn't really have much exposure and I still got in my time, so it's not really that big a problem. So for your own self-preparation, some resources that you could look at are, for math in particular, the NUS papers. So NUS is the National Mathematical Olympiad of Singapore that I believe some of you have taken part in. And yeah, so these papers, again, as I mentioned, the NUS is significantly harder than the questions you would expect in the test. But doing the NUS will regardless be good preparation for the paper. You can also try out some number puzzles and tricks that involve some deeper thinking. For example, 3D visualization, or just in general, problems that do not require more knowledge than the syllabus, but require much deeper and clearer thought. Again, we will make these points a bit clearer maybe when we talk about the camp. So for science, we will recommend a revision with a focus on the conceptual understanding, and we emphasize that there's no need for keywords in the answer, because honestly, the NUSH teachers are not aware of what the PSLE keywords are, so they will not grade on them. There's an emphasis, again, as mentioned, on the concept of scientific thinking, how you interpret data and how you look at a set of data that is perhaps a bit new and interpret it and draw new conclusions from them. Okay, sorry, just to mention, this is for your own self-preparation outside of our classes. When it comes to, we do offer DSA prep classes, which is what this webinar is about, and we'll be talking about them near the end. So where to find these resources? Most of them we should already be familiar with, but the one I want to draw attention to the most is the NUS Co-op at NUS Central Library. So it is mostly focused on NUS merchandise, but it does help NUS High publish some books. For example, the NMOS solution manuals can be found there, and so on. So yeah, of course, Popular and Carousel, those are good as always. Okay, moving on to the camp. So the camp is in some way it is similar to the test in the sense that you are focused on the thinking skills rather than on specific content knowledge. But in the camp, this is taken to a new level. So the topics in this camp are often very far out of primary school knowledge and are completely not expected to have any prior exposure to the subject, but rather the focus is on how you firstly discuss and present your ideas, and secondly on how you think, how on the thought process that you have when you see something that you almost certainly haven't seen before. Of course, there is also some need for mechanical skills to conduct experiments. So mechanical skills is not that important to train, but it is just something that you should have. So for example, in the camp, there'll be a few experiments that are done, and it will be very helpful to be able to do them more quickly, for example, so that if you make a mistake or you do something wrong, you have time to figure out what's wrong. So, and also try not to break the apparatus in the lab. So yeah, generally, there's no need to worry if you haven't dealt with all these equipment that we have in the lab, but it's just the hands should be to some extent functional, and try not to get injured before the camp. That's the main thing. And okay, so for some sample tasks, I want to use these sample tasks to emphasize a few points. That first, you are not expected to have seen any of these before, and many of these, the solution is not expected even from year 1s, year 2s, or sometimes even year 4s in NUS High. The main focus is on how you see these, how you react to these experiments, and when they teach you something, can you assimilate the knowledge into what you already know, and use that to sometimes draw new conclusions. So we'll be going through 3 tasks, and I'll be talking about the first one, which is chemistry. So what happened first was that we watched a video on paper chromatography. And again, if you haven't heard about this, it is perfectly okay. Then they had us do the paper chromatography with step-by-step instructions on how to do it. And then we had to plan an experiment using this technique of paper chromatography to determine what dyes there are in an M&M, and then discuss it with the peers. So in this case, because of the discussion phase, it is not entirely about how good you are and how much you know about paper chromatography. It is also about how well you can explain these to other people and present your own ideas. So I've written a sample example for this. In this case, a good example would be that I think that the red dye and M&M might not separate into its parts because if they're different dyes, they might likely contain similar chemicals and the attractive force between them will be stronger. So for those parents who are aware of chemistry and have probably taken chemistry in university or something, you might know that this answer is 100% wrong, but it is nevertheless a good answer. Why is it a good answer? Because firstly, you show some knowledge of your own in the sense that similar chemicals will similar colored dyes might contain similar chemicals. That I think is wrong, but it is a logical guess. Then you also show that you are able to incorporate what you learned. So in the video, they mentioned some terms like attractive forces, attraction to the stationary phase, these kind of things. It is okay if they go over your head to some extent, but regardless, you should be able to draw some kind of approximate conclusions to show that maybe you might not have fully understood everything, but you can understand somewhat what is going on, and from there you are able to go even further. So this shows that you are good at learning in some way. And lastly, I want to talk about a logical explanation. So yeah, generally the entire structure of an explanation has to be logical. It is not you do not need to talk as if you are doing a presentation, but regardless, there should be some form of logical flow to it, and it should be understandable. And that we feel will help a lot in the camp. An example of a bad answer is that it's just quoting what you read or what you saw in the textbooks and not showing that you are able to learn. So in this case, this student did not show that they were able to learn from the video that they were shown. And so yeah, that's why this is a bad answer, even though this answer is correct. Some more general tips. Firstly, be receptive to feedback. So for example, a teacher might ask you, what if I told the chemicals were different? Would your answer change then? And when the teacher asks you a question, you do not always need to agree with them and change your answer, but either way, you should justify your answer logically. So you will say that if the chemicals were different, how would this affect my argument? Then how would the attractive force change? Will it be stronger? Will it be weaker? And so on and so forth. Regardless of what the test format is, there should always be an attempt to logically link ideas, and generally any statement should be justified. And another note, don't worry too much about being weird or not sociable. The focus should be mainly on being polite, inquisitive, and generally having that scientific curiosity of being able to make conclusions, make inferences, of being able to learn, and so on and so forth. Now, Paul will be talking about some other sample tasks.
Sure, thanks, Shinrui. So I'll be talking about two other tasks that do require slightly different skills from what Shinrui has mentioned, but are very similar in the sense that you have to present a sense of logic. So quite often, during the camp, you'll be given quite a few tasks. Very often, one of them is a writing task. So for our time when we had the writing task, it was about the math question. They told us to throw a dice to see if the dice is fair. So he told us to record down many attempts, perhaps around 200, and then just write a short paragraph about whether we think the dice was biased towards a certain number and why we thought so. So the reason I bring up this particular example is that very often students may conflict these outcomes of like certain unevenness within the outcomes and whether the dice is biased. And sometimes this is not very clear because this is a big concept in science where it doesn't mean that just because there's a certain trend, that means that there's something faulty with the setup, for example. So this is just about idea of independence of outcomes in math. So they do not need to know this really, but they should be able to justify whether they think this is going to be fair or unfair. So for example, just as a quick example, if I threw the dice 200 times and of them, maybe 100 of them were ones, then maybe you have an inkling that it is quite likely that the dice is biased because it keeps going to 1. So if you see that there's quite extreme there's a quite extreme bias towards one side, then the student would have to explain that since this is much more than what we expect, so maybe out of 200, we expect 1/6 of them to be ones, that comes out to be about 33. So if 100 being so much more than 33, that seems to be something a little bit fishy. Then they can say logically that, okay, since it strays so far from the expected value, then that means the dice might be biased. Now, another possible good answer may be just that it is impossible to tell if the dice is biased because each throw is independent of each other. So what this means is that whatever I've thrown before this doesn't affect my next throw. It could very well be 1 out of 6, and I could very well have thrown any possible progression. So just because it is possible to throw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the dice, it means that any sequence is technically possible, and you might not know very much about whether the dice is biased. So that is also another possible answer that they could accept. So this is just one example of where when they give you an essay question or another task, there may not necessarily be only one correct answer. You just need to be able to justify logically why that is a good answer. Now, the other one is the type that needs a lot of creativity. Now, from one of the past years, they were given a glass cup, chopsticks, a balloon pump, a candle, and a plate. And they were told to find as many ways as possible to lift the glass cup 5 cm above the table. So just a small amount. But the most important condition is that they cannot touch the glass directly with their hands. So this is quite out of the box because you're expected to not just come up with a solution, but you must explain to the teacher there after you've thought through it how to do the solution and why it works. So that means that you would be expected to be able to demonstrate how you were able to lift it up. So this is also what Junwei mentioned about needing some basic skills and basic dexterity to be able to carry out the experimentation. So, for example, one solution that some students had done was to wrap the balloon around the end of the chopstick, pry it into the cup, and lift it up that way. Now, it seems like a very crude method, but as long as you can explain what you're doing, it's actually perfectly fine. So what the student explained was that because the balloon actually increases the friction between the stick and the cup, it made it easier for them to lift it up. That is actually a very valid concept, and since it is within the PSRE syllabus to talk a little bit about friction, that's actually an answer that many students are actually capable of giving. The difficulty is only in trying to think of a solution. So sometimes the items that they give you can be a bit misleading. They may choose to give you some things that want to lead you into a certain direction, but don't necessarily work. So, for example here, one intuitive solution that many students loved to do was to think about whether they could pump up the balloon using a balloon pump until the glass cup would rise. But what many students found was that the glass cup was too heavy, and so it meant that the balloon, even after being inflated, could only lift the cup around maybe 2 centimeters. So the main point I want to emphasize with that is that you would need to think out of the box. So one way of thinking of approaching it is that rather than trying to follow a specific purpose of an item, you could also think about combinations of items. So for example, if I had to use a glass cup, the chopsticks, and maybe the balloon pump, how would I do it? Would I maybe be able to pick up the glass cup just with the chopsticks? So that would be the thought process. Now, I think another popular solution that students had was to try and see if they could use a candle on the plate. Now, this is because there's a very classic experiment within primary school where you put a candle on a plate of water and you put a glass cup over, and then they notice how it extinguishes and how the water level will rise. So that might be on people's minds about whether there's some form of air pressure that might keep it there. So this is also a possible solution theoretically speaking, but many students found that this approach didn't work simply because the glass cup was too heavy. So the value actually comes when the value in solutions is when they are out of the box and able to overcome some of these challenges that the traditional methods that they're trying to hint at you might not work. So I think we can go on to the next slide. So yeah, as mentioned, the idea is to have creativity in solutions and not to force yourself to use the most obvious method, and to explain why each method you think works and what's its relevance. Now, just to speak a little bit about the interview as well, it is in fact very similar, and you would be expected to give some form of logical thought process or justification. So there is an anecdote from past students that when applying and during the interview phase, they told the interviewers that they loved quantum mechanics, right, which is some advanced area of physics. And the teachers were quite surprised, and they thought, okay, so what do you like about quantum mechanics? But the student really couldn't answer that. So what our main point here is that you shouldn't be going into the camp or the interview thinking of name-dropping certain concepts you've heard of. without really knowing what you're talking about. It is perfectly fine to be interested in the most mundane things. I think as a P6 kid, I was just interested in math puzzles. There wasn't really much to it. I never really studied that far in advance. So that is also perfectly fine when you're applying to a school, but you should be able to convey to them in an interview or the camp that you have quite a lot of passion for the math and the sciences, and that is more important than how much you know or how far you've read. Because no matter what, you should be able to justify why you enjoy the math and sciences and why you should go to NUS High. That is the main focus of the selection process. So I'll go to talk a little bit more about the services that we offer beyond this session. So we offer prep classes for the DSA test specifically. So the reason that we only offer it for the test and not for the camp is because a lot of what is covered during the camp, as we've just mentioned, is very difficult to teach within a session, whether it's online or physical. So because there's so much experimental skills that need to be developed, it is usually difficult for us to come up with very many novel questions to prepare students. However, for the test, since a lot of it depends on exposure and developing some of the logical thinking skills as well as how to interpret information given to you, we do offer such lessons. Now, the focus will be on the higher order thinking questions from within the PSLE syllabus, but also give a bit of exposure to Olympiads. So what that means is that we will cover some of the contents that would typically be only seen in an Olympiad, like for example, Math Olympiad, but don't actually stray very far. So it relies on the same mathematical tools that they have learnt. So for example, certain properties of addition, manipulation of geometric figures, but not really things that are very foreign and require a formula for them to know. For example, telescoping sums, which is something that's typically covered within NMOS and SMOPs, mainly SMOPs, but it is not something that is really very accessible to most students. So these do not tend to come out in the test very much. Now, we will be giving our original resources with practice questions, and they are set with the test in mind, although the exposure will be helpful in all of the later rounds as well. The price will be about $220 for 3 lessons of 2 hours each, so 6 hours of content in total, and this will cover a single subject. You can choose to sign up for each subject individually or both, and I think some of you already have signed up for that, so thank you very much. So as for the class timings, we have recently opened up a second slot to be able to accommodate students. For us, our goal is really to keep class sizes small so that both the tutors and the students can have the best experience possible. So our first slots will be on 14th to 16th June, which is a Wednesday to Friday. Math will be in the mornings and science will be in the afternoons on those days. Now it will be the other way around for the 19th to the 21st of June, which is a Monday to Wednesday. Science will be in the morning and math in the afternoon. For those of you that signed up before we opened up 2 slots, you would have signed up for the second slot here from the 19th to 21st of June. If you would like to swap between the 2 slots, please just drop us an email or a text message and we can help you sort it out. So we want to keep it to a maximum of maybe 6 to 8 students, ideally only about 6 per class, to be able to keep the sizes manageable. And if we need it, we may open another additional slot if we find that there are many more students. We do have enough tutors and time slots to be able to do so. So if you do know anyone else who is also keen to look for preparation for the classes, please put them in contact with us. We'll be happy to help. So a little bit about our tutors. All of our tutors are NUS High alumni because they themselves have gone through the experience of not just the test, but also of being through the school, which instills a lot of the same values and the mindsets that the teachers are trying to find when administering the selection test or the camp. So all of our tutors, we also give you the additional guarantee that they are among the top within the NUS High population. So most of them have either represented Singapore in some international competitions or have been among the top in their batch where they've been shortlisted for either the principals list, which is like within the top 10% of the batch, or for valedictorian, which is actually the top 4 of each cohort. Now, all of our tutors have also received offers from universities overseas. Now, not all of them chose to do so, but all of them had received offers in the process and are incredibly qualified. So we're very thankful to have them on as part of our team to be able to teach you for these lessons. Alright, in that case, that comes to the end of our main segment here. Now, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about the test, the camp, or just about the NUS High selection process in general, or anything that happens as part of the school's curriculum. To help streamline this, we would like to request if you could put your questions in the chat instead, and we'll be able to answer them verbally. So this will just make it a bit easier instead of having to unmute yourself and ask questions. So we'll just answer what is shown in the chat.
Hi, a question here. I'm not able to access the QR code because I don't have Telegram. Can I go ahead with my questions?
Sure, go ahead, please.
Okay. Two things. One is, do you also help the kids prep for the interview? Should they get through the first round? The second question is, you have two sets, A and B, right, for the classes. Um, are these like repeats or are they like different?
Oh,
Okay.
sure. So just to answer your two questions, the first one about the interview, we don't offer a group class for the interview because it depends so highly on the student. We can try and link you up with some of our tutors if you're interested in really having coaching sessions as when the time comes. But two important things is that firstly, the interview is only for it's only for a very select portion. That means that of those who go through the selection camp, possibly around 90% don't even do the interview. They will just,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so they will just go either directly get an offer or just be directly rejected. The interviews for borderline cases.
Got
And
it. Got it.
as mentioned earlier, since the preparation is centered really around finding what suits the student and to be able to explain about their passion. So it'll be mainly about looking at their own current portfolio and interest to see what to talk about. There's no formula or script you should follow because the most important is be genuine with the teachers. All right, so I think regarding your second question on the classes, yes, the two sets are identical. Set A and Set B have the same content, but we just run two slots to be able to accommodate different people's dates. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. And how do I get in touch? Like, do I express like the interest for the slots?
Sure. Perhaps you could scan the second QR code on the left, or on the right. The tiny URL link is the link to our form, which has the sign up information. Alternatively, we can provide, I think our email is contact@pd-stem.com. So
Got it.
that's another option you could take. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
So, okay, that's another two
Sorry,
questions.
just to add a bit on that, our website is pd-stem.com. So over here you can find all our information, and this is our email. This is our form for general queries, and to sign up for the DSA, this is the same one. The second QR code as shown earlier. You can go to Programs, DSA Preparation, and there's a form here. This is the same as the QR code I was shown earlier, and I will be sharing that again in a moment.
Okay, I think let's field some of the questions from the chat as well. So how do you know that your child is really keen on math and science? I think that's a very big question. So I think for me, it was an easy decision myself back in the time because I was always keen on math from the very start. In fact, I wasn't really that keen on the sciences, and I actually discovered it more in NUS High, and I found I actually enjoyed physics. It just happened to turn out that physics is a very mathematical science. To really find that you're keen in the math and the sciences is really to see what sparks interest in this child. What do they find joy and wonder from? Is it something, let's say, so some of our students may also have interest in other things like the arts as well. There's nothing wrong with being multifaceted and having many interests, but it's to see whether they have that passion and intellectual curiosity. That means that do they really wonder about the way things work? Are they interested in certain, let's say, tricks that happen, tactics and strategy even? So I think I noticed a lot of my fellow classmates as well, even if they weren't so interested in, let's say, the sciences to really study at depth, they also have interest in very similar sort of disciplines where it involves a lot of strategic thinking, whether it's through video games, like for example, playing out war games or like playing chess, for example. Some of these things are actually very related, and it means that many of them possess very similar skills and interests to what would be suited for a math and science curriculum. Okay, I think the next question is on whether there are science open-ended questions in the selection test. To our current knowledge, no, there are no open-ended questions. It is mostly MCQs. I'm not sure whether in the more recent years they have also included questions where there may be fill in the blanks with a certain word, but because of the contents being presented to you being a little bit beyond the syllabus, most of the time it'll be MCQ to be able to guide you along and give you what you need to solve. So that means that you wouldn't need to know prior information or concepts to answer it, but based on your PSLE knowledge, you should be able to deduce based on the questions there what the answer would be. So regarding the questions on the how many percent make it through from the written test to the camp, this is roughly around 25%. So the number of slots they have for the selection camp is usually around 400 to 600. It depends on the year and how many they think are qualified to get through. So it's usually about 1/4 of applicants who make it through to the camp. After that, it whittles down by about another 1/3 to get through from the camp to finally receive an offer. So you're expecting somewhere around 8% of students to maybe 9% of students that might finally receive an offer of admission to NUS High. And I think the final question here is about how high a level are the humanities taught or tested. So the humanities are made to be as rigorous as the sciences. That means that choosing a humanities option is not really an easy way out for students. It is just another way for them to pursue subjects that they are interested in. So for myself, I actually did music as my fourth subject. So I did math, physics, chemistry, and music. So what we had to do was actually present a recital of pieces on 2 instruments, as well as do some other teaching content, as well as lecture recitals along the way. So there's a lot more skills that develops just beyond answering like exam questions. There's a lot of performances for music. There's also a lot of opportunities for event planning, where you're expected to be able to run the recital yourself and sort out many logistical details. The humanities are generally taught, I would say, at a slightly higher level for some subjects compared to other schools. But as mentioned earlier, the coverage can be different. So while we may not do as many essays, for example, for economics, there would be more focus on econometrics, the mathematical side, where you learn to do calculations that most of the A-level students may either be not exposed to or may not be a big focus for them. This is generally true for most of the humanities. If you would like more information about that, the school also has something called the Program of Studies. If you search for the Program of Studies on their website, it will give you an idea of all the modules that are being offered and some of the contents that each of those modules cover. Perhaps, should we have anything to add so far based on any of these questions?
Okay, so maybe to talk a bit more about how to tell if your child is really interested in math or science, maybe I should talk about something that appeared in my YouTube feed this morning. So if you know that TEDx has posted some puzzles online, and those can be quite good. Firstly, for just pure interest, and secondly, they can actually to some extent be good preparation for the DSA test. So the one that I was watching this morning was about a card game, and then I take a number, and then based on some like factorization rules, you take a number, and then there's some strategy to win. So yeah, I found that quite interesting, and I think those can be a good way to see if you're really interested in math or science. Well, in the case of these puzzles, just math usually.
Okay, I think we have one more question about honors programs, as well as how well do they score when they read NUS modules. Okay, so the honors program is basically an advanced program. It's optional, but for students that really are interested in subjects and want to pursue it further. The very common equivalents that you might have heard of for other schools are either higher level in IB syllabus or the H3 subjects, or maybe further math when it comes to the A levels. Now, the honors programs basically allow students to either read it in-house to cover university level content, or to be able to cover it, to take the university module directly. So NUS High students tend to be able to do quite decently well for NUS modules. It really depends on the module itself. Usually it ranges anywhere from like an A plus to maybe about a B in terms of their grades, which is actually decently good if you think about it compared to the rest of when you compare it to the general population of NUS who takes that module, where you might see a few Cs. But this is also by design, because the students are expected to do well if they do go and take the NUS version of the module instead, because it's considered a little bit more rigorous than what the school offers. Now, students can offer up to 2 honors modules, so honors subjects at one time. So that is what they would allow at maximum. So you could take maybe math and physics honors. Most other schools may only allow you to take 1 H3 subject. Anything above that is subject to approval. The same sort of idea is also there in NUSH, where if you want to take more than 2, you can also do so, but with approval, because there may be some timetable issues. So the NUSH average for APs. Okay, so APs are something called the Advanced Placement Exams. These are US standardized tests. Personally, I think these are decreasing in sort of their relevance, because the subject content is actually easier than most of Singapore's syllabus, which means that if let's say you go to any school, whether it's NUS High, RI, Hwa Chong, maybe ACSI, some of these, if you take a higher level subject, you will be able to clear the APs without issues. It just happens that at NUS High, the culture is very strong that the teachers like to encourage students to take the APs, whether it's, for example, for calculus or statistics or maybe physics. And the average is quite high, around the 4.7 to 9 range. So generally, most students get 5s. This is quite a common trend in Singapore. I think the average might be a bit higher than other schools, but I can't really speak to that. All I know is that in Singapore, it's quite common to get 5s as well on the APs if they do take them. Perhaps Junwei can answer the last two questions.
Just add a statistic that my math teacher told me. Apparently, NUS High has never gotten anything less than a 5 for the AP Calculus AB. In our entire history, we've never gotten anything less than that, which is the highest grade. So, yeah. Okay, as for the last two questions about research and Olympiads at NUS High. So, NUS High does make a very good attempt to encourage exploration out of the syllabus. And in fact, this is what I chose to do. So, in your specialization years, you can take up to like 3 sciences, but I chose not to, specifically so that I could focus on research and the Olympiads. So, as for research, every student has to complete what we call an ARP, Advanced Research Program, in their last year in NUS High. Well, more of last 2 years, really. And that's a graduation requirement. So you have to complete a research project and to present it. And because it is a graduation requirement, they also have, there's a lot of strong support for it. So if you do not have a research mentor, they will try to link you up with a research mentor outside. So students have worked with mentors from A-Star, NUS, NTU, like all of the research agencies that exist, really. And so that's for the ARP. But when it comes to initiating your own research project, NUS High does support that as well. So if you would like to work with someone that, for example, you've already found an outside mentor, all you need to do is to drop an email to our head of research innovation engineering, and he'll register it for you as a school project, and you can present it, and this will also fulfill your graduation requirements. So research is important in the sense that you have to finish one project, but you can choose to focus on it or you can choose to not focus on it. If you do, there are of course very strong benefits, and it is quite supported. Now the last one on the national and international Olympiad teams. So NUSI has been doing very well in both national and international Olympiads. For the authority, okay, so I do physics Olympiad, and I know that NUSI is winning quite a significant amount of the medals in the Singapore Junior Physics Olympiad as well as the Singapore Physics Olympiad and the associated competition, the Singapore Physics League. International Olympiad teams, we do quite excellently on them. So most international Olympiads, the national team has 4 or 5 members, and at the very least we get 1 member in. For most of the Olympiads, we get at least 2 in. So for example, in the International Physics Olympiad, last year we had 2. This year I believe we have 2 again. And in the International Young Physicists Tournament, this year we have at least 2, if I'm not wrong. The selection hasn't concluded yet. And and our students also generally do well there. So for example, last year, we won a gold medal in the International Mathematical Olympiad. So was it silver? I think it was silver, right? Yeah.
I believe it was silver
one of our
last time round, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and if you would like more authoritative sources on the international and national Olympiads, I believe MOE has a press release on the International Olympiads. So if you search that up, international, yeah. Okay, give me a moment to share this. MOE does regular press releases about the International Olympiads. So this was 2021. I can't find the most recent one. And you can see where all the Olympiads came from. This one is a geography Olympiad, and unfortunately we aren't that strongly represented here. But for example, in informatics, you can see 3 gold medalists in NUS High School, more from NUS High School. This is International Mathematical Olympiad. We are strongly represented as well, and so on and so forth. So for the official International Olympiads, you can always go to the MOE sites to search for these authoritative information. Okay, Paul, I believe you have a question for you.
Yeah, actually it would be for you as well. I think you got an acceptance as well. But actually it's not that big thing. I think generally it's a it's the process for Cambridge is the same for all schools. It's just you have to take a selection test. Sorry, not a selection test. You have to take an interview. So they will just interview and ask you some questions on math, and they'll just ask you. It's very similar to our test, in fact, for the DSA test, because the idea is the same. You have to do questions. It's sort of like puzzles. They're not difficult, like they're not beyond an A-level syllabus in the sense for the Cambridge interviews, but they just need you to think more and to show that you can learn. So the philosophy is exactly the same as what we're talking about for NUS High here. So the idea is that you want to be able to show that you can think creatively, to show that you understand the content, and to show that you're receptive to learning, to feedback when you're learning. So there's nothing very much to it, to be frank. It's quite lucky that I managed to get myself an offer, but other than that, there is no different formula. It's just you work hard at it, and you just seek to hone your own skills when it comes to intuition and creativity, more than really trying to like cram a lot of content knowledge. It is the same, yeah. Okay, notice that one person is asking a lot of questions. Perhaps if there are any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself as well. Okay, if there's nothing else, I think perhaps if Junwei could go to the last slide, I think with a bit of information there. So just to let you guys know, these are some of our contact links. So our website and our email are there, as well as a WhatsApp number for Junwei if you'd like to contact us. So if you feel that you have any other questions about NUS High's admissions process, as well as like how we can help you in that, please do let us know and just drop us an email or WhatsApp message us. We also for more information about the other programs that we offer outside of the NUS High program, these are also available on our website. So that shows most of the full range of what we do offer. Our team of tutors does extend beyond just NUS High students. There is some of us who are from Hwa Chong, some of us from RI, many of whom are very highly qualified, but are able to cover a range of different subjects and different schools. So if there's anything that you'd like to ask us about what we offer, please do let us know. If you'd still like to sign up for the DSA prep classes at this point, you can still do so, and you can go to tinyurl.com/NUSHDSA23. So our sign-ups will close next weekend, I believe on the 11th. So we will let you know about payment information soon for those who have already signed up. For those who submitted the form to sign up for this webinar, you can still submit the form again if you'd like to submit it to register for our paid classes. With that, that's the end of today's session. I'd like to thank everyone for coming here. We hope that this has been insightful for you to learn a little bit more about how to prepare yourself best for the NUSI test. And we wish you guys all the best for both the DSA process as well as your PSLE. So thank you very much for today.